Welcome folks, back to the rebuilding of the Thermoquad Carburetor. Today what we'll be doing is each individual part has to be inspected, so you might call this an inspection video. I'll go through it piece by piece, and I'll end with the throttle shaft wear and the air leaks that so many people are concerned about. Alright, so we can also, while I remember, this is a perfect example of this one here. It's actually got a broken piece on it that might have to be tended to before it's operational properly. Right here you can see there's a tang. It's like a bent part of the lever. It's made to be adjusted. If you bend it back and forth or too much, either way they can break off. This one is still in its place, but there's another one that's supposed to be right in here. I pointed out with the hold it for you for the video. Right here it's broken off. I don't know if you'll be able to see a little shiny spot on the end of this, but there's another one of these, or you could call it a lever arm, that still attaches to the same place, but it's supposed to be bent out at a 90-degree angle just like this one, and it's actually broken off. What that one is probably for the, I won't say for sure, but it could be the choke unloader for when you flood the engine. I'll get into more detail on that. I'm just thinking out loud here. So you just basically check all the linkages, make sure everything, no broken pieces. I did show you this one broken piece here. So you just keep going over the whole thing. Another thing to watch out for is to make sure that these 4 screws on each side, there's 2 per butterfly valve, 4 across the secondaries, 4 across the primaries. This one's broken off. I tried to remove it using the torque it until the head excuse me, breaks off, but it was too seasoned, and it's a good thing too. I left these in place so I could show you these videos. So you make sure all the screws are intact and they're all tight. Get a screwdriver and then try to tighten them a little bit. If they're moving on you, then you know there's got to be tightened and restaked. Now on the bottom side here, each of the screws, so the screws don't come loose and fall into your engine and destroy it, or let these butterfly valves start to move around in there on the shaft. Usually from the factory they take a special puncher of some kind, and then they do what they call staking on the back of the screws. They upset the threaded portion that comes through the shaft and sort of mushroom it over, if you will, to make sure that those screws don't loosen off and get ingested by your engine. So you just take a look around. If there's any gouges or anything, you can always take a file and just bring it back to the same level as the rest of the casting, the surface. Check all around. Anything visual that you see, you usually show up. Look in all the ports and orifices, make sure the threads are good for the mixture screws. If they're really stripped bad and they don't work, then no option really. I don't know if you'd want to go into what they call a helicoil, where you repair the thread, or just try to find a used carburetor and buy one that's relatively the same model as you have, if you really want to keep one of these things on your car, that is. So you look around, make sure that nothing's loose, like some of these pressed in tubes or for vacuum ports or what have you. Make sure that they're all tight and not leaking. So just go over the whole thing. And like I say, check everything, make sure everything is in its place and it's not going to fall out or anything. And if there's, make sure these springs, they're the strongest springs I've ever seen on any carburetor. They're built right onto the carb. Most return springs, they just go onto the throttle lever here to bring it back to an idle speed, close up those butterfly valves. Okay, now with all that said and done, it's time to get to the controversial part of the throttle plate here. You'll probably hear some discussions various places about what to do with worn throttle shafts. On the secondary side, they're usually okay. They don't give you too much trouble, but it's the primary side where you know, especially a street use vehicle where you're driving it every day on the street and highway, they get a lot of use. And you can see here, you can probably see on the video, if you look at the gap between the casting bore hole and the shaft that comes through, you'll see it wiggle. You can actually see it moving right there. Try to keep my fingers out of the way so you can see it. It'll actually go both ways. More or less up and down is where you get the wear. Now there's a lot of people that say, well geez, you know, that's no good, it's going to upset the calibration of your carburetor and stuff, but I can give you a few theories of my own on that. Seeing as how it's not such a real major leak, there is some air that will get past there, but as long as the way I do it, I've never you know, bored these out and put a new bushing in to tighten them up or anything. Never had to. I've worked on Motorcraft carburetors, Rochester carburetors, and also most of my time was spent learning about these things and working on them. Never had any problems, and I'll tell you why I never went to the trouble to rebush these things. Some people say they've heard them whistling and whatnot, but my theory is as follows. Excuse me. Is if you can get this thing to idle down properly and everything, then that's the basis of whether you really need to fix those that air leak that's in there. Another theory I have too is at idle, as long as you're idling okay, everything else should be okay, because air seems to want to take the least path of resistance. So once these the primary throttle butterflies open a certain amount, that's going to create a much bigger air leak than what can get through that shaft. Mind you, it might still pull a little bit through it. But once you start opening these things up, then the air wants to travel down in through the biggest hole it can find, so it's not going to be bothered too much by that. That's why I say it only really affects it at idle. When these things are almost closed, the air open a little bit. Got to let some air through. And there's another thing about the Thermoquads, not sure if it's on the other carburetors because I haven't gone into detail with many others like I have this one. I've got a gasket here I marked out that fits on here, and this slot here, these long ones, they're for the idle mixture coming in through the idle mixture circuit. That's these ones, so we leave those alone. But what's this other one here? Here and here. Now I've matched them up with some chalk here. You can see that there and there. There is no hole in this gasket that connects for anything. So if you look down this way, you'll see there's some channels leading into the primary throttle bore here and here. And what that is, that's bypass air anyway. They've already created the leak, so with or without the shaft having a leak or not, these are already bleeding air from this side. This is a top half where the phenolic float bowl fits, and on the other side there's a corresponding port, and it's this one here. It bypasses air to the bottom of the throttle butterflies here. So you've already got an air leak, you know. This thing about the throttle shafts, there's already an air leak, a bypass air. There's the idle mixture, so this isn't even lining up with the idle mixture screw port there. So there's already a bypass air incorporated in the base plate of this carburetor. So it's already got its own air leak right from the factory. So that's the main thing. I've never had to, on any of the carburetors I've worked on over the years, I've never had to address this leakage that's in here. There'll be people that say, oh geez, I couldn't get it to run right, but there's other aspects that go along with this too. You could have an air leak from somewhere else, bad vacuum hose, the advanced diaphragm in your distributor there, it could have a leak of its own. There's leaks can come from everywhere. So I've never had in the history of working on these carburetors ever had to address the leakage that's in here. But then again, you know, there's folks that say you got to do it, but it's up to you. Another thing too is when you remove all this, that's a lot of extra work. And also when you, even if you pulled the reamer through, it would only follow, even if it had the right shank diameter and everything, it would only follow a football shaped hole anyway. So chances are the butterflies would not be perfectly parallel and be even when it comes to the idle transfer ports up here. There's two little slots there. As you open the primary butterfly valves, it starts to expose the idle transfer, which takes you from idle speed and into the start of the cruising speed there as the revs in the engine come up. So you can also look there too. When you see the idle transfer slots, even if you're not going to do anything else to it, check to see that they're open about the same amount. Those two little slots right against where the butterflies come up against the edge of the bore. Just open it very slowly. You're looking at it from the bottom side. and just make sure that they're even on both sides, exposing the amount of that idle transfer slot there. Just when they're starting out there, you can usually see it. So there you have it for this inspection portion of the throttle body or base plate of the carburetor, if you will. And there's some food for thought. Hopefully you give me some comments on this, and we can type back and forth. And that's my lowdown on it anyway. I've never had to bother with rebushing these things. Maybe one day in the future I might give it a try, but it's a lot of extra work to do all that, and to get a shop to do it for you. I imagine it's probably about $100 or so job to have someone else do it for you. So it's cost effectively, it's not very good at all. So if you can get a good idle on these things with the wiggly shaft in there, then I can't see it posing any problems. Just make sure everything's safe, nothing's going to fall apart or break. Look for any cracks. And there you have it, folks. That's my take on the wiggly throttle shafts. Okay, have yourself a nice day, and bye for now.